The moment I asked about the will, she smiled like she'd been waiting. And in front of my entire family, my daughter-in-law raised her glass and said, "Oh, that was taken care of," before she went under. They all laughed. I sat there stunned. And if something like that has ever happened to you, a moment where everyone else is in on a decision about your life, I hope you'll share it in the comments. I think more women need to hear what betrayal really looks like. My name is Judith Eleanor Watkins. I've lived in the same house for 42 years. I planted my backyard hydrangeas with my bare hands. I still balance my checkbook every Sunday night. I iron my bed sheets. And until very recently, I believed trust was something you nurtured like a garden. But I was wrong. Because trust can be harvested too. Picked clean by someone patient enough to smile as they do it. It began with lemon tart. Daniel, my son, and his wife Emily invited me for brunch. Just us, Daniel had texted. Relaxed. A little welcome back after the hospital. I had undergone a simple gallbladder removal. Nothing major, just 3 nights. But I'd been slow to bounce back, and Daniel thought it'd be good for me to be around family again. So I dressed up. Pale blue blouse. Cream slacks. The silk scarf Daniel gave me for Christmas 2 years ago. I even wore my cameo brooch, the one Emily said looked museum vintage. I arrived 5 minutes early. The front door was unlocked. The house had changed. The pictures on the wall were new. The scent was synthetic. And the family photos gone, replaced by abstract prints and motivational phrases like "build back braver." Emily stood behind the kitchen island, arranging lemon slices with surgical precision. "Oh, you're early," she said, glancing at the clock. "No hug." "No, how are you feeling?" I said nothing. Just smiled and asked if I could help. "You sit," she said. "We've got it all handled now." The first thing I noticed was the chair. My chair. I'd always sat to Daniel's right at their table, a quiet nod to the years I spent raising him alone after his father passed. It wasn't tradition. It was muscle memory. But today, that seat had been replaced by a tall, floral centerpiece. So I sat across from it. Next to me was a man I didn't recognize, neat grey beard designer watch leather portfolio on his lap. Emily introduced him as James. He's helping us with some future planning. We made small talk. They didn't ask about my recovery. They talked about Emily's new audio strategy brand. Daniel mentioned a refinance. James, the guest, gave a short, polished pitch about intergenerational continuity, a phrase that chilled me even before I fully understood it. I stayed quiet, smiling, watching, until Emily brought out the lemon tart. That was when I cleared my throat lightly and asked, "Has anyone seen the copy of the updated will? I couldn't find my folder and just wanted to double-check a few things." And that's when it happened. James didn't flinch. Daniel's eyes dropped to his plate. And Emily, sweet, flawless. Emily smiled. She turned toward me, lifted her glass, and said, "Oh, don't worry, Judith. That was taken care of. Before you went under." She winked. They all laughed. Even the man with the leather portfolio chuckled. I didn't laugh. I froze. Do you know what it feels like to hear your name spoken like a problem that's already been solved? That's what it felt like. Not a joke, not confusion. A decision. A decision that had already been made without me. And that's when it hit me. What if this wasn't about paperwork? What if it was about removal? Gradual, polite erasure. If you've ever been in a room like that, where something inside you screams, they've changed something, and they think you won't notice, then please say so in the comments. I want to hear what you saw, what you said, or didn't say. Someone else might be in that same seat right now, quietly wondering if they're the only one who sees it. After that, I stopped eating. The lemon tart sat untouched on my plate. I watched Daniel check his watch. Emily talked about studio renovations. James excused himself to take a call, though I'm fairly certain he never dialed out. I whispered to Daniel on the way to the kitchen. What did she mean, taken care of? He looked at the floor. We'll talk later, Mom. Let's not make this a thing. That sentence, "let's not make this a thing," rang in my ears. It was the same thing he said when Emily forgot my birthday last year. When she told our granddaughter that I used to hoard newspapers. When she boxed up my husband's Navy medals for donation and called it decluttering. Something was very wrong, and I had let it build like a splinter I never pulled out. Because I wanted peace. Because I didn't want to be that kind of mother-in-law. Because I thought Daniel would see it. He didn't. After brunch, I walked through the house alone. My name was missing from the framed genealogy chart in the hallway. The linen closet had been relabeled. Guest supplies. My monogrammed towels, the ones Emily once mocked as Downton Abbey stuff, were nowhere to be found. But what shook me most was the safe. It was gone. The one Daniel helped install in 2009 after a break-in scare, gone. In its place was a sleek, wall-mounted white box with a digital keypad. When had that changed? And who had the code? That night, I sat in the bathtub until the water went cold. I didn't cry, not yet. Instead, I rehearsed the words Emily had used, that was taken care of, before you went under. And that smirk, that glass raised like a final toast. It wasn't just the words. It was the timing, the performance, the certainty that I wouldn't challenge her, not there, not then, not ever. And for a moment, just a moment, I wondered if she was right. But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot, because I still had one thing she didn't expect. And as I'd soon discover, Emily hadn't just crossed a line that day. She'd confirmed something I had feared for months. The will was just the beginning, and that guest in the grey coat, the one who smiled when she said it, he wasn't just helping with future planning. He was already listed as the executor. After that brunch, everything looked different, even the walls in my own home. I didn't change the paint, but somehow the light seemed colder. Or maybe it was just me seeing clearly for the first time, because that brunch wasn't a glitch. It was confirmation. Confirmation that I had already been replaced. Not with one single betrayal, but with a pattern, a rhythm, a system I had been too trusting to recognize until it finally laughed in my face over lemon tart. The signs were always there. I just hadn't wanted to believe them. Take last Thanksgiving, for instance. Emily had accidentally sent the wrong address to the family group chat. Everyone ended up at her cousin's vacation rental instead of my house. I made stuffing for 12. Only 2 people showed up, my neighbor Gail and the delivery guy from the grocery app. Emily apologized, of course, blamed iOS autocorrect. But now I wonder, did Daniel really believe that, or was he pretending not to notice? And then there was the Christmas card. Every year since 2008, I've created a custom photo card of the family. I started the tradition the year after my husband passed. It helped me feel like we were still whole. Emily took over the photos after she married Daniel, which I appreciated. She had a good eye. But last year when the cards arrived, I noticed something missing. Me. Oh, the file must have corrupted, she'd said. The printing software just cut the edges a little. You know how glitchy those sites are. And I believed her, even though everyone else in the photo had full shoulders. Even though my name wasn't in the credits on the back anymore, where I used to be listed as Grandma J. I told myself it didn't matter, that maybe it really was a tech error, that maybe I was being too sensitive. But sensitivity is not paranoia, and hindsight is sharper than any software glitch. Looking back, I see how slowly it happened. At first, Emily would rephrase things I said, soften them, like she was translating me for others. If I told my granddaughter, "That's a beautiful dress your mother must have taught you style," Emily would say, "What Grandma means is that I picked it out," always with a laugh, always charming. She called it bridging generations. Then it turned into corrections. If I told Daniel a story from his childhood, she'd interrupt. "Actually, honey, I think you're remembering it wrong. You always mix up Thanksgiving and Christmas, don't you remember?" Daniel would chuckle. "Yeah, maybe." But he didn't remember. And suddenly I was no longer the expert on my own memories. Then came the meds drawer. One weekend, I stayed at their place while my pipes were being replaced. Emily offered me a guest room. I noticed all my prescription bottles, carefully organized in my travel pouch, had been relabeled in Emily's handwriting. "Just to make them easier to follow," she said. The dosage instructions were correct, but the names were wrong. Judith. AM blue pill and PM white pill. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. But when I asked her where she'd put the original pharmacy bags, she shrugged and said, "Probably in the trash. Those labels are so tiny anyway." Tiny, like me in her eyes. And then the dentist call. Daniel called me one Tuesday to say Mia, my granddaughter, had chipped a tooth at school. I offered to drive her to the dentist the next day like I had during summer breaks. He hesitated. Emily already scheduled it, he said. She just thought it'd be less stressful if she handled it. Less stressful for whom? These weren't isolated incidents. They were erosion of trust, of authority, of me. And yet I never fought back. I told myself that families evolve, that Emily was just a modern woman with modern systems, that I needed to get with the times. Until she began planting seeds, I could no longer ignore. It started subtly. Once in front of a neighbor, she said Judith's memory is still good for someone who's had such a rough decade. Another time at a family gathering, she handed me a dish towel instead of letting me carve the turkey, saying, "Let's not risk Grandma's wrist again." Right? I had never injured my wrist, but I laughed along. I always laughed along, until the day I heard her speaking to Mia. They were in the hallway. I was in the guest room door, slightly ajar. Mia asked, "Why does Grandma always ask the same questions?" And Emily replied softly, but clearly, "She doesn't realize she's slipping. Don't correct her. It makes her anxious." I sat still, heart pounding. Slipping. That was the word she chose. That's when it clicked. She wasn't just undermining me. She was building a case. A case for what? Incompetence, senility, unreliability. I don't know, but I know the signs. I was a school principal for 22 years. I've had parents try to manipulate IEP reports. I've had colleagues weaponize tone and phrasing to justify early retirement plans. Emily was rewriting me. Slowly, lovingly, publicly. And Daniel didn't stop her. So I started writing things down. Not in a journal. I wasn't about to hand her my thoughts in a neat little book. No, I created a private email address and began sending messages to myself. Timestamps. Dates. Notes about comments she made. Things I saw. Things that felt off. Not to prove anything. Just to remind myself that I wasn't imagining it. Because when your own family starts treating you like the unreliable narrator, you have to become your own witness. And here's where I turn to you not as a character in some story, but as someone who might have lived this too. Have you ever started second-guessing your own instincts? Not because you're confused, but because someone close to you keeps calling you that. If so, I need you to write about it in the comments. Not for me. For every woman reading silently wondering if she's the only one seeing the pattern. Say what you saw. Say how you knew. Say how it started. Because I swear to you, it always starts small. What finally broke me wasn't the lies. It was the erasure. At a family barbecue in June, Emily gave Mia a heritage scrapbook. She'd made a colourful binder filled with family trees, photos, recipes. She handed it to Mia in front of everyone. Mia flipped through it excitedly. But I wasn't in it. Not once. Not a photo. Not a mention. When Mia asked why Emily said this one focuses on my side. "We'll add Grandma Judith's stories later once we have time to fact-check dates." Fact-check. As if I was Wikipedia. As if my life needed citation. I excused myself. Went to the guest bathroom. Locked the door and breathed into my hands like they taught us during fire drills. That night, I sat on the edge of the guest bed and looked out the window. The hydrangeas I planted 6 years ago had been pulled out, replaced with lava rocks and a yoga statue. My name wasn't on the mailbox anymore, just the Carlyles, her family name. The glass front cabinet I bought for Daniel as a wedding gift was gone. So was the grandfather clock, the antique pie stand, my stories, all gone. Or replaced, as Emily might say. Replaced with something more efficient, more curated, more controllable. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I emailed myself a subject line in all caps. "This is not normal." And in the body, I typed, "She's not just excluding me, she's rebranding me." And Daniel doesn't see it, But just when I thought Emily had pushed as far as she could, she crossed a line I never thought anyone in my family would dare cross. I once heard a psychologist say that abuse doesn't always come with bruises. Sometimes it comes in the form of convenience, reorganization, a soft suggestion that you don't need to worry about that anymore. At first, that sounded comforting, until I realized that what they were really saying was you no longer get to decide. It started with the closet. I had only been gone 3 nights. My surgery was minor outpatient, unremarkable. But when Daniel brought me back to my house, the one I've lived in since 1982, something had changed. My bedroom felt unfamiliar. At first, I couldn't tell why. The bed was made, the lights were on. The orchid Emily had given me was still blooming on the windowsill. But then I opened the closet. All my shoes had been moved. The shelf where I kept my handbags now held a row of labeled protein powders. My scarves, folded neatly in drawers for decades, had been relocated to the garage to make space for yoga blocks. Emily thought you'd want a more functional setup now, Daniel explained. She wanted you to have space to stretch. Stretch. I had just come home from abdominal surgery. Then came the passwords. That same night, I tried to log into my online banking account. The password didn't work. I tried again. And again. Locked out. I checked my phone. A text from Daniel had arrived an hour earlier. Mom, Emily helped consolidate your logins to make things simpler. Let me know if you need access to anything. We've got it all backed up. I froze. They'd simplified my access. Without asking, without telling, without permission. And what did I do? I said thank you. Because that's what we're taught, isn't it? Be gracious. Don't rock the boat. Appreciate the help. But deep down, I felt it. That creeping, acidic feeling of something slipping away from you and everyone around you pretending it's a favor. If you've ever had someone rearrange your life for your benefit without asking if you wanted it, please write in the comments. I want to know I'm not the only one who smiled politely while quietly grieving the loss of her own authority. By the end of that first week, home nothing belonged to me anymore. Not even the mail. Emily had set up a forwarding service to streamline communications. My own bills, the electric, the water, my AARP newsletters started going to her inbox. Don't worry, she said. We're filtering out the junk. But it wasn't just junk she filtered. It was control. It was me. The next blow came through my church. Reverend Alston called to ask if I was feeling all right. I've sent 3 texts and an email, he said. No response. We were worried. I hadn't received a thing. When I mentioned it to Emily, she tilted her head and said, "Oh, I thought we disabled your Facebook and changed your email to reduce stress. Too many notifications were overwhelming you." I never asked her to do that, but she'd already deleted my account. 16 years of photos, messages, group threads with my former students, my church circle, my late husband's Navy buddies. All gone. Backed up somewhere, Emily said. But she never told me where. By the time my second week home rolled around, I had to knock on my own bedroom door, because Emily had started using it as her restorative space. She laid out foam rollers on the rug, hung eucalyptus bundles from the curtain rod, set up a ring light near my dresser for her reflection vlogs. I stood there, still wearing a medical wrap around my midsection, holding a basket of laundry, staring into a room that now smelled like lemongrass and collagen protein. Don't you love it? She said, standing barefoot on a yoga mat. We figured this would help your recovery feel more spa-like. I blinked. I didn't ask for a spa. I asked for privacy. I tried to say something to Daniel. I really did. But every time I brought up a concern, even something small, he'd say, "Mum, she's trying. Just let her do this. It's not forever." But how long is not forever? When your name's been taken off the mailbox, when your medication has been resorted, your passwords, reset your belongings, donated to declutter, when your lawyer calls and asks, "Are you sure you authorized the change in your trust disbursement?" Yes, that happened too. Mr. Callahan, my estate attorney for the last 20 years, called me one afternoon. "Just wanted to confirm the note we received from Daniel and Emily," he said. "They said you'd agreed to reduce the percentage going to your extended family to better focus on direct heirs." I assume that was your intent. My heart dropped. I hadn't sent any such note. I hadn't seen the trust in 6 months. They had made an amendment. They had presented it as my instruction. When I asked for a copy, Callahan said, "I'll need to speak directly with you next time, no proxies." That word again. Proxy. When did I become someone who needed to be spoken for? The breaking point came with the phone call from the pharmacy. They said my prescription refill had been denied. Your caregiver told us the dosage was being adjusted. Caregiver. I asked who had called. They gave me Emily's name. I was stunned. She had never mentioned making that call. And when I asked her, she smiled sweetly and said, "I just didn't want to overwhelm you. We're taking care of it." We again? I wish I could tell you I confronted them, that I stood up, slammed the table, demanded my files, my room, my voice back. But I didn't, because I was afraid, not of them, but of becoming exactly what they were quietly labeling me to be: unstable, paranoid, overwhelmed, difficult. If you've ever bitten your tongue to keep the peace, even while your own life was being edited in real time, I hope you'll share your story in the comments. Because I think too many women have confused survival with silence. And we need to stop doing that. That night, I made a decision. I got out of bed, went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, sat at the dining table in the dark, and made a list of every access point they had touched: bank accounts, medical records, insurance, house title, trust documents, social accounts, utilities, mail. I circled 3 items. Legal, financial, digital. Those were the pillars, and they were no longer mine. But what I didn't know was the next move Emily had planned wouldn't be about access. It would be about identity, about erasing something sacred, something that couldn't be restored with a password or a PIN. And just when I thought I had nothing left to lose, I walked into the living room, and my wedding album was gone. I found the album in the donation bin. Not just any album, our album. The leather-bound wedding album from 1975, white cover, gold trim, hand-calligraphed spine. It had survived 2 moves, 1 basement flood, and the fire that destroyed my mother's attic in '93. And yet there it was, curled against a plastic salad spinner and an unopened crock-pot in a box labeled "Donate Goodwill." No note, no explanation, no apology. I pulled it out with shaking hands, terrified the corners had warped. They hadn't. But something inside me had. I didn't ask. I didn't confront. I just held it to my chest like a wound. Emily walked in, carrying a bundle of towels. "Oh, that bin, I thought it was just old stuff you didn't need." She didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Didn't ask what was in my hands. She didn't need to, because I believe she knew. I brought the album upstairs, sat on the bed and opened it. Page 1, me in my mother's veil. Daniel's father Patrick wearing his navy whites. Page 6, our kiss on the chapel steps. Page 10, my favorite Patrick holding my hand under the gazebo lights, smiling like he knew how short forever would be. I stared at that photo for a long time, and that's when the tears came. Not quiet tears. Not elegant movie scene tears. Ugly, trembling sobs from a place deeper than memory. A place called grief delayed. Grief delayed is dangerous. It disguises itself as patience, as forgiveness, as being the bigger person. But really it's just pain postponed, until one day you're clutching a wedding album like a lifeline and wondering, was any of it real? I tried to talk to Daniel. I needed to. I called him the next morning, asked if he could stop by alone. He did. He brought coffee, sat on the edge of the couch, eyes darting between the mantel and his phone. "Emily's just trying to help," he said after I explained. Maybe she didn't realize it meant so much. I looked him dead in the eye. "She put our wedding album in a donation bin, Daniel. She probably thought it was a duplicate," he replied. That's when I knew I had lost him. Not completely, not physically, but emotionally he was gone. Somewhere between their couple's budgeting spreadsheets and their estate optimization workshops, my son had forgotten that loyalty can't be automated. He no longer saw me as his mother. He saw me as a variable. And here's where I turn to you. Have you ever watched someone you raised? Someone whose scraped knees you once kissed? Whose nightmares you once calmed? slowly become a stranger in the service of someone else's comfort. If you've lived that shift, if you've had a child go quiet, go neutral, go blind, then please write in the comments. Say what it looked like, what it sounded like, what it did to your spine and your spirit. Because there's a woman reading who needs to know she's not alone in that silence. After Daniel left, I stopped opening the curtains, not out of depression, but out of defiance. If they were going to reduce me to background, I might as well live in shadows. Emily didn't notice. Or if she did, she called it hormonal. She began leaving pamphlets on the kitchen island, aging and anxiety home safety for seniors, estate planning made easy. Subtle poison sealed in politeness. A week later, I discovered she had sold my piano, the baby grand, the one Patrick surprised me with on our 10th anniversary, the one I used to teach lessons on every Thursday after school. It had been posted online under her resale account. Vintage upright must go downsizing. $1, $200 OBO. I confronted her. She didn't even apologize. It was taking up too much space, she said. And let's be honest. When was the last time you played it? That night, I wrote a letter to Patrick. Not because I believed he could read it, but because I had no one else to talk to. I wrote about the piano, the album, the will, the feeling of erasure. And I ended with this line: "They are carving out my legacy while I'm still breathing." I tucked the letter into a book on the shelf, but the next morning, it was gone. I searched the room, every drawer, every crevice, every dust jacket. Gone. When I asked Emily if she'd seen any papers lying around, she shrugged. "Oh, I tossed a few loose notes. Thought they were old receipts." Old receipts, my grief, my thoughts, my voice. Trash. Something broke in me that day. Not loudly, quietly. Like a splinter slipping into a nerve too deep to remove without tearing flesh. I no longer felt human in my own home. I felt archived. That weekend, my sister Carol called from Arizona. We hadn't spoken in months. I think she sensed something. I told her bits and pieces, not everything. She paused and said, "Jude, this isn't normal, right?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Write everything down," she said. "And get that lawyer of yours back on the phone." I told her I didn't want to cause a rift. She replied, "Honey, the rift's already there. You just didn't dig it." That phone call saved my sanity. Because for the first time in weeks, I said it out loud. They're trying to erase me, and saying it made it real, but also made it mine. But what Emily didn't know was that I had started recording. Not conversations, details. Timestamps, passwords, missing objects, overheard phone calls. A trail, a pattern, a pulse. What she didn't count on was that I wasn't the only one watching. Someone else had seen everything, and they were about to speak. It was the mailman who changed everything, not a lawyer, not a neighbor, not a priest or a private investigator. Just a man in a navy uniform carrying envelopes and wearing a puzzled expression. His name was Theo. He had delivered to my address for 8 years. We knew each other by name. He sometimes left handwritten notes if I forgot to collect mail during winter rains. But this time he hesitated before handing over the bundle of envelopes. "Sorry," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "I thought you didn't live here anymore." That sentence froze me. I what? He looked uncomfortable. "Just figured with the hold requests and forwarding orders that maybe you'd moved to assisted living or something." I stared at him, confused. "There's a hold on my mail." Theo frowned. "Yeah, it started about a month ago. Pickups under Emily Carlisle's name. Forwarding set to a P.O. box in Brentwood." I nearly dropped the envelopes in my hands. Emily had placed a mail forwarding order in her name for my address, to a box I'd never seen, in a city I hadn't visited in years. Theo saw my expression and paused. "Wait, you didn't request that?" I shook my head, pulse pounding. He rubbed his chin. "Do you want me to check the system? See what's on file?" "Yes," I said. My voice barely came out. He nodded. "I'll swing back after my route. You'll want to see it." That evening, Theo returned with a printout. The documentation was clear. Name on file, Emily Carlisle. Request type temporary forward. Duration 60 days. P.O. Box, Brentwood, 9047. Justification. managing household affairs during post-surgical recovery of elder relative. There was a signature. It wasn't mine. It looked close, but it wasn't mine. Theo looked me straight in the eye. I'm not supposed to say this, but if someone forged your name, that's federal. My hands trembled. Can I get a copy of this? He hesitated, unofficially sure. And just like that, I had my first piece of hard evidence. I sat at the kitchen table that night, staring at the printout. Not because I was shocked, but because I was ashamed of how not shocked I was. It fit too well. The missing bank statements, the delayed insurance letter, the sudden lack of phone calls from friends who used to write. Emily hadn't just isolated me socially. She had redirected my life quietly, bureaucratically, legally. If Theo hadn't said anything, the next morning I called Callahan, my attorney. I told him what I'd discovered. There was silence on the line. Then a sigh. Judith, he said carefully, do you remember the notarized letter you supposedly sent in April? My chest tightened. No. It requested we freeze distributions to your sister Carol and reassign Daniel Carlyle as co-trustee. My throat went dry. I never wrote that. I didn't think so, he said. It was signed, but something about it felt off. He agreed to meet me the next day, privately. No proxies, no Daniel, no Emily. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, thinking of all the things I'd let slide. The little adjustments, the small favors, the just helping phrases. I had mistaken erosion for accommodation. At the firm, Callahan greeted me like a daughter. I've already started reviewing the changes, he said. And I want you to look at this. He handed me a document. Attached to it was a scanned email sent from my email address instructing changes to my trust. The message was short, cold, and robotic. Please proceed with updates per my son and daughter-in-law's request. I approve all changes. I didn't write it, but I recognized the language. It was Emily's. Her favorite phrase, per request. She used it with vendors, painters, delivery services, per request. Callahan looked at me. We can press charges. I blinked. Forgery, misrepresentation, potential elder financial abuse. We'd have to gather everything, mail records, account access logs, digital IPs. My head spun. I wasn't ready for war, but I also wasn't willing to keep surrendering. I walked home in silence, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something new rising inside me. Not sadness, not defeat. Anger. Not rage, but righteous, cold, intelligent anger. Because now I knew. I wasn't paranoid. I was being rewritten on paper, and the signature was forged. That evening, I confronted Emily. I waited until Daniel was gone. She was making tea in the kitchen when I placed the mail forwarding form on the counter. Her hands stilled. What's this? She asked. You tell me, I replied. She looked up, eyes narrowing. Is this supposed to scare me? No, I said quietly. It's supposed to remind you I'm still here. She didn't deny it. She didn't even look surprised. Just smiled that smile. Judith, you've been overwhelmed. I stepped in. That's what families do. I held her gaze. Families don't erase each other. Her smile faltered for the first time. And I realized something. She didn't expect me to fight back. Here's where I need to ask you, the person watching this. If a stranger, a mailman, a lawyer, a nurse came to you with a truth that shattered the story your own family had told, would you believe them? Or would you convince yourself it was a misunderstanding? Tell me in the comments. Tell me what you would do if the only person who saw the truth wasn't one of your own. Because I almost ignored Theo, and if I had, I might have lost everything. But I didn't. Now I had a folder, a timeline, a fire, and someone else watching from the shadows, ready to step forward. Because just when I thought I was alone, someone rang the doorbell. A woman I didn't recognize, but who said I used to work for Emily, and I know what she did. My name is Emily Carlyle, and I didn't destroy a family. I reorganized it. Because no one tells you how much space a mother-in-law can take up until you live with her shadow in every room. She was everywhere. In the way Daniel stirred his coffee, 3 counterclockwise turns, 1 tap, the way Mom does it. In the framed childhood photo he kept on his desk, the one she sent every year for Christmas. in the fact that he still at age 37 asked for her approval before we booked vacations. I married a man who had never learned to put up a boundary with the woman who raised him, so I did it for him. It didn't start out malicious. I didn't set out to erase her. Not at first. I tried to include her. I invited her to brunches, copied her on emails, even let her have the final say on baby names, a courtesy that nearly cost me my daughter's middle name. But no matter how much I opened the door, she always took the whole hallway. She commented on how we decorated, on how we raised Mia, on which babysitter we hired, on the tone of my thank you cards. She sent Daniel articles about nurturing strong mother-son bonds. She corrected me in front of our friends. She once rewrote an entire grocery list I made in red ink. So yes, I took control, because she was never going to give it. The will. I didn't forge it. Not really. Daniel and I drafted what we knew she had already said she wanted, and we helped her confirm it while she was under post-op anesthesia. Was that unethical? Maybe, but it was necessary, because she kept changing her mind. One week, Carol was in the next, she wasn't. Then it was some niece in Oregon she hadn't seen since Bush was president. She called it thoughtful estate planning. I called it chaos. And chaos has no place in legacy. The trust update. We restructured it. We had to. Daniel and I were building a future, a family empire. The property, the podcast network, the foundation work. It required liquidity, simplicity, not fragmented assets tied up in nostalgia and family politics. Her money was just sitting there, dead equity. So we reallocated, we consolidated, we optimized. We protected her from her own sentimentality. The mail redirect, that was me. Because she kept losing things, forgetting due dates, calling insurance companies 4 times in a week over the same dental claim. I didn't want to embarrass her, so I streamlined. I protected her dignity by quietly assuming responsibility. And honestly, she should have thanked me. She didn't lose her room. She lost her clutter. The guest room needed purpose. My vlogs were gaining traction. The light in that room was ideal. The energy was calm. Her yoga mat was symbolic. I wasn't taking over. I was making space for evolution. But here's what no one wants to admit, especially not women like her. Some mothers don't know how to step back. They define themselves through sacrifice, through martyrdom, through staying needed. And when that need disappears, they panic. They weaponize memory, emotion, regret. Judith didn't want peace. She wanted permanence. She didn't want to be honored. She wanted to be obeyed. So no, I don't regret what I did. Because I saw a future where our daughter wasn't tethered to guilt, where decisions were made from clarity, not obligation. And yes, I smiled when I said that line at brunch. That was taken care of, before she went under. Because I meant it. It was done. The chapter closed. But now she's pushing back, recording things, whispering to lawyers, acting like a victim, turning shadows into threats. And here's where I'll ask you, the viewer, the outsider, if you had a chance to clean the slate, to correct generational dysfunction before it passed to your child, wouldn't you take it? Tell me in the comments, was I wrong to protect my family from inherited chaos? Or is this just what progress looks like when it's not wrapped in lace and tradition? Because I won't apologize. Not for the will, not for the piano, not for the mail, not for saving Daniel from a life of guilt-ridden servitude. She thinks she's gathering allies, but she has no idea what I already put in motion, and what's about to arrive in the mail next week. There's a moment, and you'll know it if you've ever lived through betrayal, when the grief stops. Not because you've healed, but because it's been replaced by something sharper. Resolve. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't kick down the door. It simply arrives quietly the way winter arrives. First as a chill, then as a season. For me, that moment came when I opened the envelope. It was left on my porch in a manila folder. No return address, just my name handwritten. Inside was a typed letter. You don't know me, but I know her. I worked for Emily for 8 months as her virtual assistant. I handled emails, calendar invites, document edits. You need to know what she's doing. She asked me to prepare backup drafts of your will in case you became uncooperative. She also had me run a background check on you, including medical records and any early onset indicators of cognitive decline. I saved copies before I quit. I'm attaching them to this message. LS? There were 3 attachments: a forged version of my will dated 6 months prior, a memo titled Narrative Shift Plan, Judith, a screenshot of a spreadsheet labeled Post-Transition Asset Flow. I read each one 3 times, and by the end I wasn't scared. I was done. Done being quiet. Done being graceful. Done hoping Daniel would wake up on his own. Emily had made one mistake, one she'd never anticipated. She assumed my generation didn't know how to fight back. The next morning, I went to see Callahan. He scanned the documents. His jaw tightened. "This is enough to initiate a full civil review," he said. "Possibly criminal. But we'll need to tread carefully. If she's done this to you, there's a pattern." He offered to refer me to a forensic document analyst and a financial abuse investigator. "I want to build this properly," I told him. "No confrontation. Not yet. I want it legal, clean, irrefutable." He nodded. "Then we build a file." And build I did. I started with the mail. Theo, my mailman, agreed to write a sworn affidavit. I printed all bank logins, activity logs, and password reset notices. I ordered copies of every amendment filed through my trust's digital portal. Sure enough, several had been accessed through an IP traced to Emily's business address. I logged dates every moment I'd been excluded, misrepresented, manipulated. I color-coded them. I turned my life into a case. I didn't tell Daniel, not yet. Instead, I requested a meeting with the notary who had supposedly witnessed my authorization letter. It was a mobile notary firm. The woman Angela met me at a Starbucks. I showed her the signature. She leaned back in her chair. "That's not the woman I met," she said. She described a short, slim brunette who'd claimed her mother-in-law couldn't attend in person due to confusion and medication. "Emily," Angela signed a statement, gave me her business card. "I've seen this before," she said. "You're not alone." I cried in my car after that. Not out of weakness, but out of clarity. I had the truth. I had allies. I had paper. Now I needed to protect my voice. So I bought a recording pen. Wore it clipped to my shirt every day. If Emily slipped even once, I'd have it. I also reached out to my sister Carol. We hadn't been close in years. A mixture of distance and pride. But when I told her what was happening, she didn't hesitate. "Tell me what you need," she said. "I'll come." She arrived 2 days later with a suitcase and her old paralegal ID badge. We were sisters again, not by blood alone, but by battle. Together we went through everything. The piano sale, the medication labels, the deleted emails. Carol catalogued. I testified. One night, as we sat cross-legged on the floor with files spread around us, she looked at me and said, "You know what's craziest about all this?" I looked up. "She probably still thinks you're not capable of doing this. And here's where I ask you, watching this reading, this living some version of this, have you ever reached your limit, that moment where sorrow turns to steel, where you no longer ask why they're doing it? You just start preparing to stop them. Tell me in the comments. Not because I need validation, but because someone else needs your courage to wake up." The next step was the bank. Carol helped me schedule an in-person appointment with the branch manager. There, I revoked all joint access, reset all security questions, reinstated full paper statements, requested physical backup cards. I felt like I was breathing for the first time in weeks. Then came the day I returned to Emily's podcast studio. She was filming. I stood in the doorway holding a small envelope. "You dropped this," I said. She paused, recording. "What is it?" "A list of every asset I've reclaimed." She stared. "Judith, what are you trying to prove?" "That I'm not dead yet," I replied. And what I did next would ensure she never held a single piece of my life in her hands again. I chose the church basement for a reason. Not because it was holy, not because it was neutral, but because it was the last place Emily would expect me to reclaim my power. For 30 years, I'd hosted bake sales in that room, taught Sunday school, led widow support circles after Patrick died. That room knew my voice, even when my family had forgotten it. I invited Daniel first. I said it was urgent, private, non-negotiable. He hesitated, but agreed. Emily came too uninvited. Of course she did. She wore white linen, minimal makeup, just enough perfume to be noticed but not challenged. Carol was already there, seated near the front of the folding table arrangement, her laptop open and blinking. Theo, my mailman, arrived next. He stood by the water cooler, arms crossed. Then Callahan, my attorney, walked in with a folder so thick it looked like it could double as a Bible. And then Angela, the mobile notary. Emily's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" she asked, taking in the faces. "An intervention?" "No," I said, stepping forward. "A reckoning." Daniel looked confused. "Mom, what's going on?" I turned to him. "Sit," I said. "You need to hear this. And so does your wife." He obeyed. She didn't. She remained standing, arms crossed like a queen, surveying her peasants. Perfect. I began with the will. I placed the forged version on the table, then the real one beside it. Callahan walked the group through the differences. Names changed. Percentages shifted. My signature on the fake a near match, but not exact. Angela testified next. "That's not the woman I notarized," she said calmly. "The woman who signed that document wasn't Judith Watkins." Emily's jaw clenched. I moved on to the mail forwarding. Theo stepped forward. "I've delivered to Judith for years. I can confirm a change request was made under someone else's name." I brought the documentation. He held it up. "I also filed an internal report. This is a federal offense." Daniel's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Emily," he whispered. She said nothing. Carol stood. "We've catalogued over 17 changes across financial, medical, and legal platforms, all initiated by your wife without Judith's knowledge or consent." Daniel looked nauseous. "She was trying to help," he began. "No," I interrupted. "She was trying to replace me." Then I handed Emily the envelope. Inside was the email from her former assistant, LS, the attachments, the notes, the memo titled Narrative Shift Plan, Judith. Emily didn't even open it. She dropped it onto the table like it was contaminated. "I don't know what kind of circus this is." "It's not a circus," I said. "It's your legacy, and mine." The room was silent. So silent you could hear the radiator ticking behind us. Daniel looked at me. For the first time, really looked at me. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because you wouldn't have listened," I said. "You would have called it drama, just like she trained you to." Emily finally spoke. "It's all circumstantial. None of it proves anything." Callahan stepped forward. "That's where you're wrong. We've begun proceedings, and everything you see here has been notarized, backed up, and pre-filed." Emily's face changed, slightly, but enough. Fear. The first real crack in the porcelain. And here's where I turn to you, yes, you, watching. If you had been in that room, if you had seen the faces, the facts, the flicker of truth, pushing through years of denial, would you have stood up? Or would you have stayed silent? Tell me in the comments, because too many of us have been trained to look away, to call it family tension instead of abuse, to call it help instead of theft. I want to know, where would you have stood? Daniel stood. He looked at Emily, then at me, then back at her. "I need time," he said. But I had heard enough. "Time is a luxury I no longer owe anyone," I said. And with that, I walked out. Because the legal battle hadn't even begun, and Emily was about to learn what it felt like to lose something she thought she'd already won. The summons arrived on a Tuesday morning, hand-delivered in a flat legal envelope. Emily had officially been named as a respondent in a civil complaint under the California Elder Abuse and Dependent Adult Civil Protection Act, specifically sections pertaining to financial manipulation, undue influence, and fraudulent access to fiduciary accounts. It was the first time she realized I wasn't bluffing. It was also the first time she saw my name not as Mom or Judith, but as plaintiff. The case was filed in Santa Clara County Superior Court. We weren't aiming for jail time, not yet. We were seeking immediate revocation of unauthorized access to all legal and financial documents, a temporary restraining order from managing or benefiting from my estate, an injunction against further contact or influence over any existing trusts, and most importantly, a full forensic audit of all accounts Emily had touched in the last 18 months. It wasn't revenge, it was restoration. Emily tried to delay the hearing. Her lawyer filed a motion, citing emotional distress. But the Judge Honorable Diane Vu denied it. There is credible preliminary evidence, Judge Vu said firmly. This matter will be heard. Daniel showed up to the hearing, alone, no words. Just a quiet nod as he took a seat behind me. Emily sat beside her attorney, lips pressed into a line so tight it could have been stitched. She wore grey, no jewelry, no smile, a stark contrast to her usual curated elegance. For the first time, she looked small. Callahan stood and delivered our case. He presented the forged email from Emily's assistant, the affidavit from Theo the mailman, the statement from Angela the notary, screenshots of access logs from trust platforms traced to Emily's business IP, medical documents showing no cognitive decline, refuting her claim of confusion. And finally, the email titled Narrative Shift Plan, Judith. Judge Vu adjusted her glasses. Is this real? Callahan nodded. Your Honor, it was sent by the respondent's assistant under her direction. The courtroom fell silent. Emily's lawyer tried to pivot. He said she acted out of care. He said she filled the vacuum left by an aging mother-in-law with poor record-keeping. Judge Vu raised a hand. We are not here to debate her administrative skills, she said. We are here to determine if the respondent deliberately and fraudulently transferred legal power without consent. Then Emily spoke. For the first time. Judith never said no, she said. She never resisted. Judge Vu leaned forward. Silence is not consent, nor is dependence justification for theft. Emily blinked. That one sentence from a judge on the record cracked the room open. Callahan ended with a closing statement I'll never forget. This is not about generational tension. This is not about taste or tradition. This is about a woman who built a life, who survived loss, raised a son, maintained a home, and then had it quietly stolen beneath her feet by someone who called it help. We're not here to punish progress. We're here to punish fraud. The ruling came 24 hours later. Judge Vu granted a formal injunction against Emily accessing or managing any legal, financial documentation belonging to me, a mandated forensic audit of all past changes to my estate, and a court-ordered restoration of all original directives in my living trust. She also referred the case to the county's elder abuse unit for possible further action. Emily left the courthouse without speaking. Daniel stayed behind. He sat next to me on the bench outside. I didn't know, he said. I didn't look at him. I just said, but you should have. And here's where I ask you, the viewer, the daughter, the son, the daughter-in-law watching this, was this justice? Was this enough? Do you think a woman should have to take her own family to court just to be heard? Tell me in the comments. Because there's a generation watching us, and what we normalize becomes their blueprint. Later that night, Callahan called. There's one more thing, he said. What? A clause? In your original estate documents. Do you remember the letter you attached to your trust? I frowned. Yes. Well, we found it. And the court didn't remove it. And that clause, the one Emily never saw, would change everything she thought she'd secured. I sat at my kitchen table with the morning sun warming my hands, the same table I thought I'd lost to someone else's agenda. The same seat Emily once replaced with a juicer cart. The same window she once covered with blackout blinds so her camera equipment wouldn't get glare. It was all mine again. But it wasn't the furniture that mattered. It was the stillness. The silence that no longer felt empty, only earned. It had been 90 days since the court ruling. Emily had moved out of the house she once insisted was theirs. Daniel stayed in it, alone. According to Carol, he was rethinking everything. I didn't ask what that meant. That wasn't my business anymore. I had stopped asking what Daniel was thinking the moment I realized he had stopped asking what I felt. The clause in the trust, the one she never saw, was simple. In the event of any attempt to misrepresent, manipulate, or interfere with the autonomy of the settler, by any named beneficiary, said beneficiary shall be disinherited in full, and all rights shall revert to contingent parties per original 2005 directive. It was my own little safeguard. A whisper from the past version of me, the woman who trusted too easily, but never forgot to leave herself a back door. That clause voided every gain Emily had made and reinstated my original plan, Carol Mia, when of age, and a charitable trust for music scholarships in Patrick's name. I returned to the church basement last week, not for confrontation, for choir rehearsal. Margaret brought lemon tart. We laughed about how sweet it was, almost disrespectfully sweet, Carol joked. I didn't say it, but I thought, how poetic. The dessert that opened the wound is now just dessert again. Mia called me 2 days ago, on her own. No prompting, no speakerphone. Grandma, she said I found some old photos on Dad's computer. Were you a singer? I smiled. I still am, I said. My days are quieter now, but not small. I've joined a memoir writing circle. I bake for neighbors. I'm working with a non-profit on elder fraud education. They're using my case as a teaching model. Some people say I was brave. Others say I was lucky. But I don't think I was either. I was simply done. And here's where I turn to you, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with truth. When someone steals your name, your voice, your past, you don't just fight to get it back. You fight to remind yourself you were never lost to begin with, only silenced. So tell me, do you think I should forgive her? Do you think what she did was redeemable? Or do some betrayals write themselves in ink too permanent to erase? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because someone else is reading, and they may be standing at the edge of the same choice. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, unforgettable, subscribe now. We don't just tell drama here. We tell survival. As I folded the original copy of my will and slid it back into the fireproof safe, I whispered a line I wish I had said out loud at that brunch long ago. That was taken care of by me, long before anyone else thought they could.